when I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous.
Jameson Williams has been so impressive these last couple of weeks.
Yo. Welcome to another edition of the Cover 1 NFL Draft Weekly. We are one short week away from the ultimate destination here on this show. And a lot of folks, the time they put into, scouting and doing, watching film and putting player profiles out there. We're one short week away. So once again, I am your host, Burn River Sports, Rich. I'm joined by Russell Brown at Russ NFL Draft. And, like I said, Russ, 1 week away, man, it's getting there. How's your excitement level building as we're 1 week away from the draft?
Oh, man, I'm so excited. I can't even, like kids get excited for Christmas. They get excited about Halloween, the Easter Bunny. I'm losing sleep. I'm drinking cold drinks. I'm so pumped, man. And you're pouring yourself one. It's been a very fun draft season. And I'm excited to kind of cap it off with the draft next week. I mean, live from the Brass Rail in downtown Detroit, across from Comerica Park. It's awesome. I can't wait for that. I know we got a lot of live draft coverage coming here on Cover 1. A lot of the guys are going to be doing some stuff on Thursday. Eric, Greg, and Aaron, Eric, and Greg are going to be in Las Vegas doing some live stuff. So, I'm excited, man. I'm very excited. How are you? How are things?
I'm honestly, I've been a little under the weather this last week. I don't know, hit with a little sore throat or whatnot, but I'm powering through. So, but other than that, I'm with you, man. I'm excited. Cover 1 has a big lineup this weekend, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, basically full live shows each day. As you mentioned, Greg, Aaron, and Eric will be live from Las Vegas. I'm jealous. I was able to attend the draft last year in Cleveland, and it was a blast. I can only imagine what that's going to be like, in one of my favorite places on earth in Las Vegas, Nevada. So, just looking forward to getting down to actually being able to talk about things that happen. I mean, we've been talking for weeks and weeks about what we think is going to happen or talking about player profiles, but I think it's going to be awesome to actually start talking about things that have happened. So today, for everybody out there, we are going to go jump into some round 3 discussion, kind of continue to follow Russ's draft guide, which again is available for free, downloadable on cover1.net. So if you have not downloaded that yet, please check it out. It's pretty awesome. So we're going to go towards the bottom third or so of his guide and kind of look at possible round 3 targets for teams. And also, just as usual, take your questions. So any questions that you have, put them in the chat. We'll just grab them and talk about them as we usually do. We like interacting with all of you much more honestly than just talking about, player profiles. It's always great to talk to everybody out there in the chat. So throw your questions out there. But before we get into, round 3, maybe just go around the horn a little bit here in the NFL. The past week, I'm curious to get your thoughts on some things that may or may not impact the draft, but I think are just interesting happenings from around the NFL. And I just want to kind of kick it off with Deebo, Deebo Samuels and the rumors that are going out there right now with Deebo, and possibly, he's obviously asked for a trade from San Francisco. So what are your thoughts? Is he going to get traded? What are your thoughts? Are you hearing anything on that? And if he were to get moved, where do you think would be a good landing spot for the very versatile Deebo Samuels?
Well, obviously, I mean, I know the media is pushing a lot of he doesn't want to play, running back, and he's not going to come back to the team and all this stuff. And I would probably agree to a certain extent. I'm sure no receiver that feels like he's a true number 1 receiver, he probably does not want to play running back by any means. But also, I mean, they've got an opportunity to kind of hash this out and get a deal in place, but it's just obviously probably coming down to dollars and cents. And I think ultimately, does that lead to Jimmy Garoppolo being dealt? And that's because that frees up a little bit of money, and then you can make some things happen there. So I think if he was to get traded, I would say, the Jets make a lot of sense because they have the capital in the top 40. They've got 4 picks. You look at Green Bay, they've got 2 first-rounders. I instantly go to them because I think of Matt LaFleur, being able to utilize him. You think of, the Packers, they go, well, we get rid of Devontae Adams. We didn't want to pay him. I don't know if they necessarily have to pay Deebo Samuel the same amount of money that Devontae Adams is getting. But if they give him a reasonable deal, and obviously, as we know, the salary cap is not a real thing. It's not even close to being a real thing. So I think he would make a lot of sense if they gave up 22 or 28. You look at San Francisco trying to just maybe get a first-round pick in there. Kansas City, 29 and 30. I doubt that happens, but you never know. And then the last one would I would probably say the wild card for me is the Chargers. I mean, they don't have a second-round pick this year, but they have a lot of day 3 picks. I mean, they have 4 picks in the 7th round, which hold really no value, but they've got enough like day 3 draft capital to move around into day 2 if they got rid of pick 17. And I think that ultimately comes down to how does the board fall for them? So is it, Jameson Williams off the board, Chris Olave is gone, Drake London is gone, Garrett Wilson is gone. If 4 of those top 5 receivers are gone, and maybe in all 4 offensive tackles, it's all very possible. And the only thing that they're left with are maybe a corner, an edge rusher, and maybe a quarterback. They might be like, yo, we're going to pay this guy. But at the same time, they just paid Mike Williams. They have to get ready to pay Justin Herbert. So maybe that's not a realistic option. But I just kind of look at them and I'm like, they're interesting. And lastly, I will say the Ravens are the team that I think maybe, and I know you as a Browns fan, you don't want to hear that, but they got pick 14. I mean, they haven't paid their quarterback yet. So maybe, just maybe, you never know.
Yeah, I've heard some chatter about the Ravens, and yeah, that would be, one of my, as a Browns fan, least happy scenarios is them going and getting, torpedoing the offensive lineman, throwing them there with Lamar, and then trading for a Deebo. Like, that would just make me not happy whatsoever. Jessica, we are doing well. Shout out to you. Hope you're also doing well. Thank you for the comment there. But Jason was talking about the trade rumors, saying that they are a joke, and he was actually talking about, the one we just mentioned, and also the next one I want to get your more opinion on. I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but more of the Kyler Murray saga. Kyler out there in Arizona. What are your thoughts? Why do you think that is a contentious situation right now in Arizona? And again, maybe landing spot for him. I have another kind of doomsday scenario that I would hate to see, but curious again on your thoughts on Kyler and, what's going on out there. Maybe would he get potentially moved? And if so, could that impact any of the teams interested in a quarterback in the draft?
I mean, I would be stunned if they traded him. I'll be honest. I just like, if they get rid of him, what's the option other than him? You know what I mean? Like, pick 24, are you going to land Desmond Ridder? Are you going to draft Matt Corral and tell your fan base that, hey, this is our guy? Like, I just have a hard time believing it. I think they're gonna see how the draft goes, and when it's all said and done, they're gonna get their draft kind of in place to where it needs to be, and then they'll as far as signing them and stuff like that, and then they'll go out and they'll get him under a contract. I have a hard time believing they won't. Not saying Kyler Murray is the best quarterback in the NFL by any means, but this team has already kind of hit reset at QB twice in the last 3-4 years, and they did it both times, in the top 10, top 5 of the draft. So I don't see him getting dealt. I don't see them parting ways. And I mean, unless there's something really serious behind closed doors that I have no idea about, which is very possible, or maybe he's seriously got the urge to go play for the Oakland A's, but I don't see that being the case. So I think eventually there will be a deal in place for him. I think there will be a deal in place for Deebo, whether it's for another team or the 49ers. But yeah, Kyler Murray, I don't see him going anywhere.
Well, that makes me excited because, this is kind of a scenario. And shout out to Spin, always out in the chat giving us good comments. But why not trade Murray to the AFC? That would be, if he ended up somehow with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and as a Browns fan, I had a deal, and even Bills fans. I know most of you out there are Bills fans, but if you had to deal with another quarterback of his caliber in the AFC, I mean, man, Lamar, Watson, Burrow, Kyler, all the same division. Oh no, I do not want that one bit. And Jason, I just liked his comment, made me laugh. Trade Murray and go get Mayfield. Yes, please do that. But just don't trade Murray. Don't trade Murray to the AFC North, please. And yes, please take Mayfield off the Browns' hands. That would be phenomenal. Arizona, if you could go ahead and do that. I'm still curious what's going to happen with Baker. Where he's going to go. There was some rumors out there about Carolina, some rumors about Seattle, but I'm very curious what's going to end up happening there with Baker Mayfield, as he's very short on options right now, in my opinion, out there around the league. Couple more thoughts before we jump into some actual round 3 draft talk. Again, if you're out there, feel free to get your chat questions in about the draft. Doesn't have to be about round 3. If you want to ask some more questions about round 1, I actually have some mock drafts pulled up. I kind of want to get Russell's opinion on outside of his own mock draft, just back into the first round a little bit. But, do want to get a couple more thoughts just about going around the NFL. But before we do that, maybe we can grab Jessica's question, because I always love just answering the questions. So she throws up there, do you guys feel there's much of a difference between a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick? And maybe let's say in this draft, because I do think there probably is a little bit of a difference depending on the draft. But in your opinion, in this draft, is there much of a difference between a 3rd and a 5th round pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. It's just, one, it obviously depends on who the player is and where he goes and things like that. But I think there is. I mean, a 3rd round pick, you can find some really good value in year 1 and especially in year 2, where a 5th round pick, he might be a special teamer, which holds value, but he might be a special teamer for 2 years, maybe 3 years. And if that is the case, is he playing a lot of defensive snaps for you or offensive snaps, depending on the position? Maybe not. And if the 3rd rounder is, then I think that holds a little bit more value for you. Now, obviously, if the 3rd rounder is not playing up to par, he's not, you need him to get, let's say, 5 tackles a game and he's only getting 3, or he's not getting any, then obviously that's a conversation as well that needs to be had. But ultimately, it just depends. I mean, more often than not, not all 3rd rounders panned out. Not all 2nd rounders pan out for a team, but most 3rd rounders find their way into a rotation somewhere, somehow. It feels like at some point in the draft. Just, it kind of depends on the position and ultimately where they go. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of a difference. And I think the expectations certainly change quite a bit. When you say, hey, I'm a 5th round pick rather than a 3rd round pick, well, the expectation's like, okay, well, you're a 5th round pick. You could get through training camp depending on how, where you are as a player. And if you make the team, or you might make the practice squad, but if you make the team, then, you might just, again, be that special team type of guy. And I always go to the Lions because that's my team. But you look at a couple years ago, Jason Huntley, he was a guy out of like New Mexico State. They took, I believe, in the 5th round. He was a running back. He got through camp. They let him go. He goes to the Eagles and he's playing for them like in week 6 and he's scoring touchdowns. And people are like, oh, I got to add this guy to my fantasy team. So it depends. I mean, it just really depends on where these guys go and how the team views them after they get into camp and they see them up close and personal.
Yeah, and just to kind of add on to that, Jessica, I feel, in my opinion, just watching drafts for year after year for the last, I'd say, 20 years of my adult life, I feel like the value certainly is there in rounds 1 through 3, regardless of position. You have obviously a higher probability of hitting on one of those picks. Then it starts to drop off exponentially, a little bit dependent on position, but it starts to drop off exponentially there in round 4. And just one example, and this is a tweet by Marcus Mosher. To give him some credit on this, he just put it out. This is just specific to the wide receiver position. I happened to see it a couple minutes before the show. I really liked it. The odds of you finding quality starting wide receiver, so we're just talking about wide receivers, past pick 75 or roughly mid 3rd round, is around 5%. Then that drops to 2.6%, finding a Pro Bowl receiver in that round, 0.7%, finding all pro receiver in that round, and then it drops exponentially after that round by round. So that's just the wide receiver position, but at least you have an opportunity to find something there in the top 3 where you're finding the needle in the haystack later on. Now, in my opinion, I think that in today's NFL, your positions of value, so edge, corner, wide receiver, quarterback, in my opinion, those are kind of your big money positions right now, the way the league is gone. I think you can find some talented players in later rounds like linebacker, or like there's a comment in the chat, Wyatt Teller, a 5th round pick that the Browns scooped up from the Bills, who's been a monster, for the Browns on the offensive line. I think you can find players like that later on in the draft because they're not at those positions of value, so they get pushed down the board a little bit, and they go a little bit later. So, Jessica, to your question, again, I think it's dependent on position a little bit, but in my opinion, outside of the 3rd round, it does start to get a little more difficult to find an impact player. But if, again, depending on the position, you're going to have a higher probability. I think right now at like that linebacker, middle off the guard position, center position on the offensive line.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, you're very spot on with that. It's just, your expectations kind of alter by position. If you grab a 5th-round quarterback, you're not expecting him to play right away. If you grab an interior offensive lineman in the 5th round, he's maybe there because of positional value and how teams view, a right guard or a left guard or whatever. And they fall a little bit in the draft, and you end up getting them, and they end up busting their tail, and they become, very solid at the next level. It ultimately depends on what the position is and really what the expectations are. I mean, if a guy's forced into a starting role as a 5th-round pick, let's say, for example, a 5th-round pick to Buffalo, and he starts from day one, and then you look, in that same draft, there's a 3rd-rounder that goes to the Raiders, and he's not playing because his roster spot or the depth chart, he's 2nd or 3rd. The expectations just change because, you'll look at it and be like, well, we took him in the 5th round and he's better than that guy at the same position for the other team in the 3rd round. It depends on what the situation truly is and what those expectations are.
Yeah, a couple more comments that I wanted to get at. So, talking about the Bills' 25th pick, there's 2 comments about that. One, we have Kenneth here talking about the Bills going to take Breece Hall at 25, which we haven't necessarily talked about yet on this show, but I've seen it now in some mocks this week where he's getting mocked to the Bills now at 25. Yeah. So I actually had that as a question for you later on in the show, but we might as well hit it right now since Kenneth brought it up in the chat. I know you're not as high on Breece as compared to maybe some other draft pundits out there. I believe you had him ranked in the 50s off the top of my head from your draft guide. Mm-hmm. So, what are your thoughts? Is it a good fit, at least for the Bills, if they take Breece Hall? I would assume you're going to think that's too high, but what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it's a fit for them. But personally, I'd be going with my top guy. That's Kenneth Walker. When you look at the two, I don't know how you can look at both films and be like, yeah, Breece is the guy. I just don't see it. And maybe it's because it's a consistency thing. Maybe because Breece has been starting for so long now at Iowa State, but when I don't know, you look at Kenneth, and again, I'm saying this as I have a Spartans freaking hoodie on, but it's just one of those things, man. I think he'd be the guy that can truly becomes that true number one. Where Breece, yeah, he's got the potential, but maybe he's only got the potential because of what's already on the roster. But you add him, you're still going to use those complementary pieces behind him. I still believe that. Whereas Kenneth Walker, like I've said, you can give it to him 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row, and he's going to keep going. He's like an Energizer bunny, dude. He just keeps going and going. So, I mean, you can think the Bills are going to take him. It's possible they could. I mean, there's been times like, Najee Harris was a very common pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that never changed. It's a chance. I mean, there's a chance here that Breece Hall just goes to 25 and people are plugged in and know exactly what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott are thinking. But I beg to differ. I think they're a very tough team to kind of figure out around draft time. I didn't think they were going to go Gregory Rousseau. They did. I didn't think they were going to double down and go Carlos Basham after that. They did. I didn't think they were going to go Tommy Doyle and Spencer Brown, and they did. I mean, like, they're a tough team to figure out and how they value the board. So I think a cornerback is a lot higher on their list than people really want to believe. But that's just me. And I think ultimately, depending on how that board is, I think the cornerback spot is the thing at 25 that they ultimately do, unless there's a very spicy receiver, or again, to this point, they truly value Breece Hall and think he can be a game changer. And if they think that, I can't fault them for thinking that. I mean, everybody views these players differently. I view them in one way and you view them in a different way.
It's kind of on that. The next comment's kind of right off of that comment. I agree. I think the Bills would be in the best position to help their team out and their defense if they took, a cornerback at 25. Joe Hayden's out there. I don't know. I don't know if Joe Hayden's going to go to the Bills, but hypothetical question here, which, I kind of like, do you think if the Bills were to go sign Joe Hayden, who has been a very nice veteran corner since he's left Cleveland, went to Pittsburgh, had some very productive years in Pittsburgh, stand-up guy, I think still a decent cornerback for his age, but what do you think? Would that preclude, if they were to do that, would that preclude them from then grabbing another corner in round one?
Well, first and foremost, it's funny that this is a Pops Mafia question. I was sitting here looking at the chat and I'm like, man, I haven't seen Pops jump in yet. So shout out to Pops. Glad he's joining us for the last one of these, possibly until maybe after the draft. But to answer the question, I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily going to sign Joe Hayden. If they do, they do. I don't think that alters their board, though. I mean, Joe Hayden's 33 years old. He's on the wrong side of 30. He's still playing at a high level. But if you bring him in, are you bringing him in for a year, maybe two? Cornerbacks, they typically take a while to develop anyways. So if you do draft a Roger McCreary or a Kyler Gordon here, those guys are kind of being slotted right away to play in the slot. They're playing that nickel role. So if that's the case, I think it's actually a good thing that you brought in Joe Hayden. One, to lock up the outside as the number two. You now bring in that slot guy. All these pass-heavy teams in the AFC, all these quarterbacks, receivers, now you kind of lock things up, and then in 2 years, maybe you move the next guy to the outside, or you look at another outside corner, depending on what the market looks like or what's in the draft. So I don't think it eliminates it from the first round, and maybe it does, but I don't think it does. And again, we did a live mock draft on the Cover One Buffalo show, and I think I had Kobe Bryant in the third round. So maybe that's a direction that they go instead, which might be even better for them. But me personally, I wouldn't take corner off the board in round one just because you signed Joe Hayden at 33.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I agree. I think Joe Hayden would be a nice vet signing for any team, but I wouldn't, change my draft plans around Joe Hayden because at most he's probably a 1 or 2 year stopgap. So I would go get the best player available at 25, especially at the cornerback position. Yeah. So I agree with you wholeheartedly there. So let's, maybe let's jump in a little bit to the NFL draft. So, getting into the draft again, getting some draft talk again. We went around the NFL. There was some rumors again. Feel free to keep your questions coming in the chat. But before I get to that, we do, I guess, have an RIP. So I want to get that out there. Mad Bomber, ex-Bill, Daryl Monica. So, we'll pour one out for him. I saw a couple of those in the chat. So I want to make sure I get that up there and pour one out for Daryl. But if we go into the
same time, by the way.
We did a little cheers.
We did exact same time. It was like in sync. It was awesome.
I love it. It's virtual cheersing. It's perfect.
It's like COVID all over again.
It's like COVID all over again. So, let's talk about the top 10 real quick before we get into round 3 and some round 3 targets. Just curious if you heard any other chatter in the top 10 this week that really has caught your attention. Obviously Trayvon Walker is getting a lot of run at the top of the draft, which is interesting to me because I don't personally see that. But, again, I'm not watching the film like you are or like some of these other guys. So, I'm not certainly as in depth as you are. But any chattering in that top 10 that you are hearing that you think is going to be maybe a lock, somebody you really think is going to go to a certain team in that top 10, and maybe give your thoughts on Trayvon Walker to the Jaguars at number 1. And one other scenario I'll throw out there for you. I'm seeing a lot of sauciness and Jameson. Sauce and Jameson, I feel like you can do something there with that. Sauce and Jameson to the Jets at 4 and 10. I'm not sure if you're also seeing that or hearing that. So what are your thoughts maybe on those two scenarios and anything else you think might be a lock in the top 10 as we're now 1 week away from round 1?
Well, going with the Jets there at 4. I think that board is pretty much set at 4 with 3 players. I think it's Kayvon, Sauce, and Jameson. If 2 of those 3 players, probably Kayvon at, like, let's say Hutch at 1, Kayvon at 2, Sauce at 3. I think the surprise of the night would be Jameson at 4. I think they would want him at 10, Jameson at 10. That's like the dream scenario. But I think deep down they're like, man, I don't know what Atlanta's going to do. You don't even know what Seattle's going to do. Seattle's a wild card every time. So I think Atlanta and Seattle got some people a little bit spooked, and I think primarily the Jets there. But I know they like Sauce quite a bit, but I do know they like Kayvon quite a bit. So if Kayvon slides, I heard it around the combine. Hey, what are you hearing about Kayvon? Where do you think he goes? Is it 1? Is it somewhere else? And the report I got was New York. And I've said that, I think, on this show a few times. I've said it other places. And it's New York. But New York who? Giants, Jets? I mean, they don't even play in New York. They play in freaking New Jersey. So is it Buffalo? Probably not. But, I hear about New York. So I think that's where he wants to be. And I think both of those teams really want him. But the other thing is, if Sauce falls out of the top 4, I think will go 5 to the Giants or 7 to the Giants. He might see a little slide to 7 because I don't see Carolina taking a corner. I see Carolina going in the route of, obviously we could see Kenny Pickett, but I think they've done a lot of research on all 3 offensive tackles. And I think that might force a team like the Giants to take Charles Cross at 5, who they really like. And the things I've heard is Sauce and Cross. That's their dream board. They want Sauce, they want Cross, and that's that. Outside of that, again, if Carolina doesn't take Kenny Pickett, if Malik Willis isn't gone at 2, which I haven't really heard anything outside of Malik and pretty much Kayvon. I think Trayvon Walker's just hype from the media. I don't see him going 2. I'm going to be honest. I would be a little surprised, but Brad Holmes made some interesting comments today. He wants an impact player at 2. He wants somebody that's going to be special. And if that person is a quarterback, then it's going to be a quarterback. I just find that very odd. I really do. And if you say that, not saying you're blowing smoke, but there's something about it that just kind of gets me going and thinking they are going to be the team that takes the first QB. Like, that's just how I feel. And then ultimately, Houston's kind of that wild card because Houston could go Evan Neal, Houston could go Kayvon, they could go Sauce. It just depends on what's there. But really, I struggle with Atlanta and I struggle with Seattle in the top 10. Like, I think I feel pretty confident about the Jets, but I struggle with Atlanta and Seattle. Atlanta, everything's been wide receiver, but they're taking these late visits with Matt Corral. And I wonder, are they the team that's going to trade back into the first round to draft Matt Corral? That's what I think. And then maybe it's Garrett Wilson at 8 or something. And then at 20, let's say 24, 25, which would be the Bills, but they trade back in, give up both second rounders and get Matt Corral. Like, I genuinely think that's a chance. And then Seattle, I can't even begin to explain what they do. They've met with Desmond Ridder. They have a need for a quarterback. Do they take him at 9? I have no idea. So outside of that, I don't know. I'm focused on my last mock draft, and I'm like, I just want to get as many picks right as possible because I finished top 15 last year. First time I ever submitted one, like nationally, and I go top 15 in the first one, and I'm like, well, like shit, I gotta get better. So I got some pressure on my shoulders. I think that's why I'm losing sleep. I'm gonna be honest.
I saw your tweet. I think somebody tweeted you earlier today. I was like, "Oh, what's the most important thing about a mock draft?" You're like, "Getting the picks right."
Right, obviously. Duh.
Right, this is pretty funny. Yeah, I think the mock drafts this week are really interesting because you can like look at where the people's opinions have changed, and it's interesting to see that movement. We did have a question out there, a comment. I'm just trying to find it. Guys, do you think that expect Jameson to be gone? I'm assuming to the Bills pick 25. But yeah, I think at this point he's gone before 25. I'm seeing him much higher than I think we had discussed a month ago. Now, will that 100% happen for sure? Yeah, who knows? I think this draft. I think what's interesting about this draft is because I think there's a lot of variety in people's opinions on these different players. I think that this draft is going to be a tough one to slot and nail these picks from a mock perspective compared to maybe some past years. I don't think you have, you don't even have a set number 1 pick right now, honestly, in my opinion, compared to some past years. So you never know, but Brian, I would put some money on him being gone by 25 to some team. There's a lot of wide receiver needy teams before the Bills at 25. And again, I'm assuming you're asking about the Bills there. Russell, I assume you agree with that take.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if he's not a top, I'll say this, if he's not a top 17 pick, you'll find me on YouTube somewhere chugging a whole beer. I would be stunned if he, top 17 is a pretty good range. I mean, you're talking 17 teams there. Top 10, I would even be a little bit stunned. But if he slid a little bit, like, okay, maybe he makes it to 13 to Houston, I could see that. I could see, 15 to Philly, 17 to the Chargers, which I love that fit. But if he made it past that, I would be like, whoa, something's up. That knee is a lot worse than we thought, but I don't see that being the case. And also just kind of from the top 10, you mentioned not having a number 1 like for sure number one pick. And you're right. Just, from some sources and things, like there's some belief still that it's not Trayvon Walker, it's not Aiden Hutchinson, it's not even Kayvon Thibodeau. There's some thought that it could very well be an Evan Neal or something at 1. Like there is some thought there. And I'm not surprised by that by any means. So honestly, I hate when they spoil the first round pick or the first pick. I don't want them to do it, but I'm kind of like, man, please give me the details. I need to know this so I can get this draft going, like with a mock draft, so I know where to start. Like,
at least set your board a little bit. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Cause I mean, once you see any mock drafts, and I've done a ton too in my life, not to the level of insight that you bring to the table, but yeah, if you get one of those picks wrong, sometimes that snowballs in like 4 or 5 wrong picks, 6 wrong picks right after until maybe you get back on track somewhere. So yeah, if you're starting and you don't really even have a good idea of what the top 3 picks are going to be, you're in a world of hurt from a mock perspective. Looking at some other comments, I think it was Pops asked if we had talked about round 3 running or linebackers yet. No, we have not.
Pops goes, you don't want to have the very first pick wrong.
No, you don't. Not in a mock draft.
Not at all.
No, not ever. I mean, not in real life, not in a mock draft. You don't want to get that pick wrong.
That's true. That's just divorce waiting to happen.
That is for sure. Yeah, that's front office is getting fired quickly if you mess that up. But we have not talked about round 3 linebackers yet. We will certainly get to that, Pops. Also, a lot of good chatter from Silas out there in the chat, just talking about slotting salaries at the 25th pick, running back, whatever. A lot of good chatter and discussion back and forth. And, Douglas asked Silas, well, who would he like for the Bills at 25? And I actually like the players that he put out there: Booth, McDuffie, Zion, Kenyon, or Olave. I think there's a good chance, in my opinion, just based off conversations we've had for the last 10 weeks, that there's going to be at least a handful of those players, in my opinion, available there at 25. Booth, I think Kenyon might be there. I don't even know. Olave might even fall. It's weird. I've been seeing Olave in some weird places this last week. I think McDuffie might go ahead of that spot, but again, it's going to be right there. You never know. But from a Bills perspective specifically, I think all those make sense in various, for various reasons. Can you imagine if Chris Olave went to the Bills with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs? I mean, we talked about Jameson Williams earlier, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and that'd really be the same type of a situation. That would be insane. Personally, again, I'm a Browns fan, but I like to root for the Bills as well. And I would like them to get a cornerback. So McDuffie or Booth makes sense to me, but I liked Silas's list. So I just want to throw that up there from a comment perspective.
Silas is crushing the chat. Props to Silas. So much cheers to him on that. But I mean, a lot of names there. I could see a couple of those guys falling. I don't see Chris Olave falling there. I know the Eagles have done a lot of, research and a lot of work on him. And they've got 2 picks there in the top 20. You look at New Orleans, they have a need for a receiver. I think there's too many teams there in the top 20 that make sense for him. So I don't see him being there. But again, crazier things have happened. Aaron Rodgers fell in the draft, so obviously anything can happen on draft day. And that's why it is the best, the absolute best, the pinnacle of all sports is next Thursday. 100%.
The pinnacle. And there was a question from Jessica. You think Penning could fall all the way to 25? I'll let you take that one first.
Well, I mean, it's possible. I know the Jets liked him at 10 back around the combine. Obviously, things have changed a little bit. I think they got to see a little bit more of Jameson Williams. They've seen his knee. I look at New Orleans again, a need for an offensive tackle. It's possible. And if he falls there, I wouldn't be mad. If I'm a Bills fan, I'm not mad if they took Trevor Penning at 25. I compare him to Garrett Bowles, overly aggressive, does some dumb stuff in the pocket, like throwing linemen into his quarterback. But like, you need a guy that can bully, and you need a guy with aggression, and a guy that doesn't care about getting his hands dirty. And that's the type of player he is. And if he ends up falling to 25, he'd probably be the best player on the board at that point, I would assume. Unless there is, maybe a Kenyon Green or something like that there, depending on how they value it. But it's an offensive tackle. Like, there's a need there. Whenever you're a team, even though they have Spencer Brown and he did well. So there's a chance he falls. You look at Dallas, you look at Arizona, the teams in front of him, I just have a hard time believing that they would pass on him by the time he got there.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Baltimore, like I mentioned already, as a nightmare scenario for me is if they were to go get him, add him to the offensive line and then go add a Debo or something from a trade perspective. I think the Saints with, 2 picks, 16 and 19, they need some offensive line help as well. You never know. It depends on what they're going to do there. But between Baltimore, New Orleans, and then to your point, Arizona and Dallas, I'd be very surprised if all 4 of those teams passed on him. If he was still there for those picks. So I don't think there's much of a chance that he's there at 25. But again, thank you for the questions. I do want to answer Brown's question because, I don't get to answer Brown's questions too much. So again, from our boy Pops, did the Browns have voluntary workouts here this week, and did Deshaun, show up and practice a little bit? Yes. The answer to those questions are yes in both regard. The whole new QB room was there for the Browns. Josh Dodds, Deshaun Watson, Jacoby Brissett. So they were all there in the house. Everyone looked, it seemed to be a very upbeat locker room, which was nice to see. John Johnson III was very vocal and seemed happy. So obviously, hey, who knows? It's just voluntary workouts, and obviously there's a lot that still has to get cleared up off the field for Deshaun Watson before you can really get excited about his on the field to play. And I'll preface any comment I ever make about Deshaun, I'm going to talk about Deshaun on the field, because obviously anything that happens off the field, if any of those things are true, they're obviously very terrible things. But I'm going to separate that and just talk about on the field stuff for Deshaun. But yeah, he did show up, and I think that QB room is going to be an interesting one here for the Browns. So I think whether they have to go with Brissett for a little bit, if Watson is suspended at any time this year, I think he's good enough to kind of get by. I personally don't think Watson's going to get more than 4 to 6 games this year. If he gets anything this year, I think those civil cases are going to take a long time to get worked out, because I think he is going to fight them. I don't think he's going to settle out of court. So that might even, spill over to 2023. But long answer there, Pops, but I like to talk to the Browns once in a while. So yes, they were there. They have volunteer workouts here this week.
I just liked Ron. I like Ron Beck's comment. One, he's late to the party, which no biggie. Appreciate you, Ron, showing up as you always do, supporting us. But he also goes, "Did Watson get a massage after OTAs?"
So there's the Browns, and again, not to joke about the situation, but the Browns had a lot of flack last year about soft tissue injuries and pulled hamstrings, and not having the right equipment in the facilities to take care of those types of things. They're actually doing a huge renovation of their facility, of their campus in Bree, Ohio, where they're putting in like the state-of-the-art, huge square footage of like this just training room things with, the cryo chambers and all the state-of-the-art technology on just, healing from those types of injuries. But of course, they were doing this before Deshaun Watson was even in the picture. But of course, now that Deshaun Watson's there, all the jokes are coming out about, oh, look, now you're getting all these massage tables put directly into the facility in Perea. So again, not to make fun of that situation, because it is a serious one. But that's been a lot of those jokes on Twitter right now. And unfortunately, until those things get cleared up, if they do get cleared up, I mean, that's the things the Browns are going to have to put up with a little bit from a potential distraction perspective, at least here for the short term with Mr. Watson.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I don't have much to add to that. You hit the nail on the head there. I hope it works out for him. I've always been a Deshaun Watson fan. Obviously, there's a lot more behind the scenes than I can obviously go into detail about, because I have no idea. I'm not there, but I'm rooting for him, obviously, and I'm rooting for Cleveland to kind of figure it out, because it has to work out for him. They're giving this guy way too much money for it to not work out, so we'll see.
All right, so one more just on Cleveland before we head over. I want to actually get into round 3. So we want to get to Pop's question. Round 3 linebackers, so we can get into the round 3 discussion a little bit. So we're also kind of start marinating on some round 3 linebackers that you think will be there and then you think are going to be good fits for certain teams. But again, Jessica has another question out there. What's the news on Mayfield? We talked about it a little bit earlier, but really from a Mayfield standpoint, I think, Daryl Rader, who does, in my opinion, a good job here locally, 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland, was on Bull and Basket, or excuse me, Basket and Fox. They just changed the name of the show this week and had some nice insight on Baker. The Browns, in my opinion, are not going to release Baker, at least everything I'm hearing. They're not going to release Baker Mayfield. They're going to hold on to him. They have the cap if they have to eat the $18 million, and they are going to try to get something for him. So whether that's in the draft, obviously the Carolina Panthers and what they do at number 6 is going to be a huge indicator potentially of if that will be a landing spot or not for Baker Mayfield. So hopefully, something gets done day 2 of the draft, day 3 of this draft with Carolina. Seattle is still in the mix for Baker Mayfield. But if those 2 situations do not happen, I would not be surprised if he remains on this roster until training camp and an injury around the NFL happens. Then they go make a move at that point. And, obviously you hate to root for injuries, but that's just, again, I'm kind of reiterating a little bit of the insight from Daryl Ryder, but that's just that's reality, right? So I think the Browns and AB are going to hang on to him. I don't think they're going to cut him, especially, they don't want him to go to a team like the Steelers. Not that I think they're afraid of his on the field play necessarily, to be honest, but you don't want that situation, really. You don't want to let one of your rivals get some inside intel on your organization, and if he were to do something, if he were to be okay, obviously that's just going to be horrible, right? So you're going to try to control that narrative. You're not just going to cut him. So just my 2 cents on Baker and what I've been hearing this week, Jessica. So thanks for that question. But that trade could matter in the NFL draft. If that goes down, it could be an interesting change up to some of the things here in the draft. But let's pivot here a little bit. Pivot. And let's go ahead and talk round 3 targets. Again, for everybody out there, if you have not downloaded Russell's draft guide, go to cover1.net. Download it. It's free. If you want to donate to charity, as he's mentioned in the past, feel free to do so. He has some links at the bottom, but check it out. It's a great draft guide to get you ready for next weekend. But let's look at round 3. What are some players that stand out at the linebacker position that might be available in that range?
Well, for starters, the guy that is 57th on the board, even though he's probably not going to go in the 3rd round, and it kind of goes to Jessica's question earlier. You're talking about a 3rd round guy, maybe a 5th round guy now, and that's Damon Clark out of LSU. He had spinal surgery a few weeks back, so there's a pretty good chance he's not going to go in the 3rd round. I mean, maybe he does, but teams are going to be hesitant. He's probably not going to play as a rookie. So you hold off as long as you can, and then you find some value there. But he's a fun player to watch. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he false steps a ton, kind of puts him behind when he's, getting into his run fits. If he's got a slide, if he goes from being in the B gap and then he goes over into the opposite A gap, like if he's bunny hopping essentially forward, he's kind of costing himself those slide steps. But then if he's dropping back into coverage as a mid-hook defender, or he's going curl to flats, he's kind of costing himself some yardage because he's bunny hopping. So again, it's all coachable stuff. Really fun player to watch, though. I watched him. I said, this is a 3rd round guy. He ended up being my 5th linebacker, and I had him in front of a Wisconsin linebacker, Leo Chenal, who not by much, a couple spots, but Chenal's another one. Chenal is somebody that I think struggles in pass coverage, but you put him down in the box. He's versatile enough to kind of play anywhere. You watch him against Iowa. He's up against Tyler Linderbaum up on the goal line, and he's tilted almost like a nose, like tilted in the A gap, and he just like slams, he knifes into him, and he blows him up. I mean, like you see stuff like that from a linebacker, and you're like, man, this is really impressive stuff. So Chenal is one of those guys that I think will get tested at times in coverage, but as that box defender, I don't want to say like Blake Martinez because that's very lazy of me, but somebody that might get, tested at times in coverage, but plays in that box. Chenal is a great fit for, I don't want to say for the Bills, but just a great fit for that 2-down role. And again, he might even have a role as a 3-down player because he could be an effective blitzer. I think he's versatile enough to do so. So Chenal and Clark make a lot of sense. Again, Clark probably won't be there. Now, this one will probably shock some people. Quay Walker, I have as my 72nd ranked player. Spicy, I know. But he is somebody that I just look at him and like what you see with him is what you get. I said it on my Woodward Sports show, well, not my show, but on the Big D show that they do mid mornings, and we talked about Quay Walker a little bit. And I mean, like he's got good length for the position, good overall size for the position. He can move at 6'4", 241. There's no doubt about it. But he finishes his career with 52 games played, and like throughout all of that, there was times that he was used sparingly, kind of on a rotational basis. But you see the potential with him. And I think that's what makes him so intriguing is like, even though he's played like this over 50-something games, like maybe with an NFL staff, he could get even a step further along. But I mean, he'll have to get stronger. He's going to have to get, better at taking on blocks. He doesn't show really the same range or the ability to scrape that I would like him to, but that's just me. But I think when you watch him in pass coverage, I mean, he can sink his hips really well. He just does a really good job kind of collectively, and he's versatile and, again, athletic enough to do a lot of different things. So he's probably going to be gone by the third round, realistically speaking. But the way I viewed his tape, I saw a third rounder. So that's just me. I compared him to KJ Wright. Have at that as you will. The next one, Darian Beavers, who is from Cincinnati. Saw him down at the Senior Bowl. This guy's big, man. 6'4", 237. Like, he is every bit of that 6'4", 237, and you'll love seeing it. I mean, I know a lot of coaches that have raved about his leadership. Some scouts I was talking to down at the Senior Bowl talked about that and said, this guy's, he's mature. He's ready to go, like probably plug and play type of guy. Maybe kind of falls into that Derek Barnes type of player. Like you draft him and you know kind of what you're going to expect out of him. He's going to come in, he's going to do the 9 to 5 thing and like go home and you're not going to worry about anything. So very instinctive player, pretty good athlete, great length, good play strength. I think he's got experience kind of rushing the passer, but tackling will definitely have to improve. And as far as coverage goes, like you're not gonna count on him there. So he's had 12 missed tackles. He allowed 49 receptions. I like him as kind of like that, like odd front Mike linebacker type of player. And then you could move him around at times and blitz him. But I like him in that third round. I think that's realistically where he goes. Former track and field star. His high jump was 5'8". So, I mean, he literally jumped almost my height. He was a 4.0 student. So again, he is somebody that like, it just checks so many boxes. And I think that's the key. Like and sometimes in the process, I kind of forget about it. Like who's checking boxes and who's not. And when you look at the profile of Darian Beavers, check mark. Like he checks the boxes. So if I'm the Bills, if I'm a fan of any team that's in need of not so much a day one starter, but maybe like that depth player that could potentially become that day one starter at some point in year one, Darian Beavers is probably the most intriguing of kind of the players I've talked about, because I think realistically he goes in the third round no matter who you talk to, where Chanel might be a top 50 pick for this guy, but only a top 60 pick, or a third round pick for me. Damian Clarkson to go in the 5th round, but somebody might take him in the 4th round. Like some of these guys, it's tough to gauge. But if you talk about, Beavers to other people, it's like collectively third round.
Awesome. All right. I do want to, I was obviously monitoring chat while you were giving the great breakdown on linebackers. And, predominantly we do, we try to talk about lots of NFL teams on this show, not just the Bills, not just the Browns. And I saw Yo Chargers out there in the chat. So I wanted to get Piper up there with a Yo Chargers. And I know you talked a little bit about the Chargers back in your first mock. I believe they're sitting at 17 overall in the first round. And, I believe when we talked about the Chargers a little bit, I believe it was on Jordan Davis, if I remember right, about 6 weeks ago when he first ran that incredible time. And you were kind of talking about, if he was he would be a potential really nice fit in the middle of that defensive line. So, maybe just give the Chargers 2 minutes of love here. What do you think they might do with that first round pick, 17 overall? You hearing anything? Give Piper some love on the Chargers.
Well, certainly, Jordan Davis is somebody that makes a lot of sense. He's a great fit for that defense. You've got Khalil Mack, you've got Joey Bosa. You put Jordan Davis in the middle of that thing. I mean, Justin Jones is gone. They lost 3 defensive tackles. They lost 3 guys in the middle of that defense. So getting Jordan Davis makes a lot of sense. He's going to help stop the run. He's going to eat gaps. He's going to eat space. And he's going to allow a lot of guys defensively to kind of get stuck in one-on-one situations, which they should win, Khalil Mack or Joey Bosa, but also other guys just to kind of roam free, scrape, fill, do certain things. And I think when you look at him, like, you take him at 17, you get a 6'6", 340-pound defensive tackle that can run a 4.78. Like, how we're not talking about him a little bit more in the top 10 is a little surprising to me. And I wouldn't put past Seattle to take him. I know they have Puna Ford, but it wouldn't surprise me if they took him. But the Chargers make a lot of sense for Jordan Davis. Devontae Wyatt's another one, just because you talk about interior defensive line. You have a 6'3", 305 type of guy. I will get there with Penning, don't worry, relax.
She's yelling at you, Russell.
Stop yelling. Just drink with me. Let's have a good time. Let's talk about this. So yeah, I mean, Devontae Wyatt makes a lot of sense. Very flexible lower half, very fluid with his lower half. You'll watch him kind of hit the A gap, plant, and go to the other A gap. Like, you don't see that with a lot of interior defensive linemen. So he's a lot of fun. I think he's a realistic option, but it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being the first interior defensive lineman off the board. Maybe the Eagles at 15. And who knows, maybe a team like Baltimore at 14 or Minnesota at 12. You never know what some of these teams are going to do and how they value a player like a Devontae Wyatt. But then I've mentioned Jameson Williams. I think that's kind of the dream pick for them. You just think of that offense, how high powered it would be with Jameson. But the last one, she mentions it, Trevor Penning. I think that's a guy that they would really value. I mean, Brian Bulaga is gone. They're going to have a need there. They have Rashawn Slater. They've done some things for that offensive line, but you've got to protect Justin Herbert. You can't do what other teams do wrong and what they've done in the past. Then if that's neglect the offensive line, you should probably do the opposite of that, and you should probably go get that offensive tackle. So Penning would be a great fit there at right tackle. And obviously, you want him to stay healthy, but really, I mean, you just get this overly aggressive tackle that's going to maul guys and throw them around. So they're kind of in a nice spot because I think a quarterback or two might push a talented offensive player or defensive player down the board to them. But also, we will get a run on receivers. We're going to get a run on a couple of different things here that's going to get them in a nice spot. And over the years, pick 17, which they've picked before, is a nice spot to find really good players. CeeDee Lamb goes 17 to the Cowboys. He was a top 5 player for me. Derwin James was a top 10 player for me. He goes pick 17 to the Chargers a few years before that. Here they are again at pick 17. We'll see what they do next week.
All right, let's pivot a little bit.
Do I think Smoke Monday will go to the Chargers? I'm 420. Let's go. I don't know. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we should have had our show yesterday, man. What the heck? We should have moved it to Wednesdays. We should have bumped something. I want to talk a little bit about Justin Ross, the wide receiver from Clemson. We haven't given him a ton of time on our shows the last 10 weeks. In my opinion, I think he might be in this range, round 3 type target. What is your opinion on Justin Ross? And I kind of looking at him from a Browns perspective a little bit. If the Browns pass on a wide receiver 44, even though I just mentioned the crazy drop off if you don't get a receiver in the top 72 picks, but if they don't do that, the Browns do have pick 78 as well as a compensatory pick 99 in the 3rd round. And also, the Bills, we've talked about the Bills adding wide receivers potentially in the 1st round pick. And I don't think that's in their best interest. I think that they should go cornerback. And if they want to go grab a running back in the 2nd round, I think that would behoove them. But hey, maybe they want to add a wide receiver, to give Josh Allen another toy, to throw to in the 3rd round. So what is your opinion on Justin Ross, the wide receiver out of Clemson?
I wish he was healthy. I'll be honest. If he was healthy, we'd be talking about him a hell of a lot more in this draft. I mean, he had foot surgery back in November. He did play 10 games this past year, but he had the fusion surgery on his spine back in March of 2020. So he hasn't played a ton of football in 2 years, 10 games in 2 years, similar to Derek Stingley. And the big thing is it's a back injury, right? Like a spine injury is no joke. You take one bad hit. Do we know you're going to walk again? Do we know you're going to play again? What's going to happen there? So I view him as a 4th rounder. I think when you look at a board of 17, 18, maybe 20 receivers, I would put him at 15 or 16 on a board. He's 16th on my board. So, I mean, you got great length for the position at 6'4", 205 when you draft him. Really does a good job on 50-50 balls, makes some very acrobatic catches, but the injuries are the big thing. He doesn't have a bunch of burst after the catch, so you're not going to use him a ton in the short and intermediate areas of the field. He's going to be like that. I don't want to say 3rd and long guy, but he's going to be on those comeback routes, on those fade routes. He's going to be utilized again down in the red zone on jump balls. So that's him. He comes from a basketball background type of player. But ultimately the health is the biggest concern. So he's going to get drafted. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be probably an emotional day 3 type of pick and rightfully so. His mom served in the Navy, was on the Alabama National Guard, things like that. So I'm sure it's going to be a really good feel good moment, and I'm excited to see where he lands. I'm curious, is a team like Jacksonville going to look at him and say, hey, we're going to pair him up with Trevor Lawrence? They've got pick 106 in the 4th round, pick 157 in the 5th round. They got 4 6th-round picks. They're going to be active, I think, on that 3rd day. It wouldn't surprise me if they moved around, moved up, took Justin Ross. And they took Travis Etienne last year after taking Trevor Lawrence. Do they try to kind of like reunite these guys and maybe try to make it splash in the NFL? I don't know. We'll see. But I think he's a fun player. But if he was healthy, I think, again, we'd probably be talking about him as a round 2, round 3 type of player.
Okay. Well, 2 other wideouts that are in that same range potentially. Kenneth brought up one of them, Wan'Dale Robinson, potentially from a Browns perspective to replace Landry. But again, I think, maybe a good fit for somebody like the Bills. Also, I want to get your thoughts real quick. David Bell, wide receiver out of Purdue. I've heard some chatter that the Browns may be interested in him. Again, maybe with that pick 99, the compensatory pick at the end of the 3rd round, if they don't go grab up a receiver at 44. So maybe talk briefly for both Wan'Dale Robinson as well as David Bell out of Purdue.
Well, starting with the higher one of the two, David Bell was 71 on my board, my 10th overall receiver. I think he could probably play more of like that Z receiver type of role. He's got good length and size for the position, 6'2", 205. He knows how to use his length, his hands to create separation. If you don't believe me, go check the game against Michigan State where he's constantly beating guys off a press and then getting downfield and still creating separation somehow, despite running like a 4.7, 5.40, whatever. It is what it is. You beat him single-handedly. I'm not salty about it. But he does a really good job coming back to the football. He makes good adjustments on back shoulder throws. And I think he's just somebody with experience playing inside, outside, 160 snaps in the slot, not ideal. But the fact that you can kind of move him around and maybe be that bigger slot guy on 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, maybe down in the red zone, it's a big plus to have. So if he can go to a place where they, I think, have a true number 1 receiver, I think that's a big plus. And you mentioned a team like, Cleveland, obviously. There's Amari Cooper there. I think a lot of people forget Amari Cooper. The offseason has been so crazy. At times I forget Amari Cooper's on the Cleveland Browns. So I think there's
let's be honest, at a very compared to some of these wide receiver contracts, that deal looks awesome right now for the Browns.
Oh,
the draft capital they have to give up and I think it was $20 million or something a year. So I'll take that all day compared to some of these wide receiver contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. And with David Bell, if you put him in a spot like that, he doesn't have to be the guy, but he should produce, and that's the key. But he will have to get better on contested catch situations. He only won 42.5% of his contested catches in his career. So that's kind of a key thing where, if he can get better there, it'd be awesome. And then for, Wan'Dale Robinson, and with that, I view him as a 3rd round pick. I think if you were to get him at pick 75, pick 80, I think it's a great value for you. It might be a little rich for some. If he's there at 99 and the Browns took him, sure, absolutely. But this player might be there at 99. He's 100th on my board. That's Wan'Dale Robinson. Versatile playmaker. He makes a lot happen. You put the ball in his hands, he's just boom, boom, boom. He's like, he's like a ping pong ball, man. He's just all over the place. And he's fun to watch. He can play in the slot. He can play in the backfield. Really good athlete. But he has shorter arms. He does not have the play strength. He's going to struggle, I think, against press, and it kind of puts him in one spot in the slot. And that's fine, but he's going to struggle again with those more physical players. And while he's a good route runner, I think when you watch him run his routes, and maybe it's there, maybe deep down in there, it's there, but when you watch these smaller, shifty players, you want to see guys that kind of have this snap when they're running their routes. Everything's it's just almost like a snap, they're going, they're moving, whatever. And with him, it just doesn't always happen. It's he's rounding his routes, and it's okay, well, I don't know how to take that, but he's a plus, an A+ special teams type of kid. He's going to be utilized in jet orbit motions. He's going to take handoffs. So he kind of fits today's NFL, but at the same time, what is he going to be? Are you going to take him early enough? I don't think so. I think you're going to probably take him again at pick 99, pick 100, something like that. And again, maybe it backfires on a team and he turns into a 100 reception type kid, but you're just at that point, you're kind of betting on upside, but I'm okay with it. So Fourth rounder for me, but you could easily take him probably in the third round and nobody would blink an eye.
All right. So we are right at the 1 hour mark on our 10th episode of the NFL Draft Weekly here on Cover One. I want to make sure we can get out of here in time for the Air Raid boys to take over at 9 o'clock. Make sure you stay on the Cover One Network and check them out. But real quick, was anyone in the third round, in the even fourth round, in the end of your draft guide that we haven't had, the ability to kind of highlight that you are interested to see where they land and maybe give that person a quick couple minutes of airtime here before we go ahead and get out of here?
I talked about him last night on the Cover One Buffalo podcast. I saw a question come up about another guy, so I got two quick guys. John Mechie's one of them, and I talked about him on the Buffalo show last night. Really tough player. He had to overcome so much to really get on the field. It was a lot off the field as well. He was born in Taiwan. He moved to Ghana, eventually moved to Canada. And he lived in Canada from 6 till high school, and then he started playing high school football at St. James High School before transferring to Petty School. And he's just one of those guys that he had an enlarged heart as a freshman. He had to sit out. So, like, as he was trying to learn how to play football, it was like, oh, I'm not even going to get to play football. And then he goes on and he plays. His brother, Royce, his older brother, goes and plays in the CFL for the Toronto Argonauts. In 2020, he gets a hip and shin injury. So John's been battled by injuries left and right, the torn ACL, and that's probably going to scare some people. But when you watch him play, I mean, he's so tough. He's very effective over the middle of the field, really runs his routes good. And I view him as a third-round player, like when you watch the tape. The injuries are going to be really tough to overcome, but if he's healthy, I mean, I think you can justify taking him in the third round. So we'll see, but the injuries are a concern. Charleston Rambo, he came up in the chat. I'll touch briefly on him. Kind of resurrected his career from Oklahoma to Miami. When you looked at him in Oklahoma, it was like a lost guy out there, and he goes to Miami. He has a great season. He had 80 receptions, over 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns. Was a former track and field star back at Cedar Hill in high school. So he's got the ability to kind of track the football vertically. He's got the speed to do so. He can run after the catch. I think he's going to be effective at all three levels of the field. It's just a matter of when he's going to get on the field. I mean, he's a fourth rounder for me. He could very well be a fifth round player, but you mentioned drops have been a concern. He tends to kind of catch with his body or kind of cradle the football rather than catching with his hands. So if he can clean that up as a depth receiver, give him a year, maybe 2, maybe 3. I think he might turn into a number 2, number 3 receiver for a team. It just depends. So it depends on where he goes. But again, there's teams like Jacksonville that have a ton of draft capital on the third day of the draft. So maybe he ends up there or somebody else. So I like Rambo. I would definitely draft him for sure.
All right. Well, hey, Russell, excellent work as always. Great job with your draft guide. Great job with all the analysis that you can provide. Just right off the top of your head. Everybody out there in the chat, thank you so much for participating and making this a fun podcast for the last 10 weeks here on Cover One, as we've tried to go outside of just the Bills niche a little bit and just expand and talk just about the NFL in general here on the Cover One network. So again, thank you so much. As a reminder, Cover One will be having a ton of coverage of the NFL draft on the network Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Greg, Aaron, Eric will also be in Vegas giving some live analysis as well. So, again, Russell, awesome job. If everyone out there hit the like, out there on the YouTube channel, out there on Facebook, out there, wherever you're checking it out, we would appreciate that. But Russell, any parting words for the fans out there?
No, I mean, it's been a ride. I can't believe this is episode 10. We've been doing this for 2 months. I mean, that's crazy to me. Yeah. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been awesome working with you during this process. I hope we do it some more next year and maybe even during the summer for some fantasy football stuff or something, just for having some fun. But no, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate you steering the car. Like I've always said, I've always just kind of needed to ride shotgun for once and let somebody drive the car. So I appreciate you doing it. And it's been a blast. And I'm looking forward to the draft next week. Find him on Twitter at Burn River Sports. Smash that follow button. Find me at Russ NFL Draft. Subscribe to the show. You can get it on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, literally anywhere. And of course, here on YouTube, subscribe to the show. So appreciate everybody. Appreciate the interaction all draft season. You can still, again, interact anytime. We'll be doing draft stuff next week. I'm pumped. I'm not going to sleep tonight. I'm buzzing. Let's go.
Love it. I love that exit from you, Russell. And yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll do one more show on Cover One for post-draft to get some takes. That might be fun. So stay tuned on Twitter. We'll let you guys know if we're going to do one more episode after the draft. But again, Russell, appreciate it. Everyone out there, appreciate it. Again, this was the Cover One NFL Draft Weekly, and we are